There's a real trend in our media, in the discourse, in how the successful, quote unquote, talk about service industry jobs and the people that do them. That these jobs are deservedly low paid, that these jobs don't merit benefits, that these jobs don't merit job security, that they're only for teenagers or for the unsuccessful, that anybody wanting a living wage should never even dream of doing service work, and that if you want good wages as a service worker, you should, be happy to essentially beg for tips. And like that should be all you should ever hope for is good tips. And don't ever think of demanding a decent minimum wage or even a minimum wage that's equal to, what other non-tipped workers get. And it just, these attacks are relentless. And they've picked up steam due to a couple reasons, which is sort of a conservative backlash to the Fight for 15, because the Fight for 15 isn't just for service workers, but service workers are probably among the biggest sectors that would benefit from that. And I think another factor has to be the rise in prominence of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the relatively new congresswoman from New York. She's a big voice on the left, and a lot of people attacked her and still attack her because she worked as a bartender. It doesn't matter that she has a university education. It doesn't matter that she's an excellent organizer and communicator. For some people, because she was a bartender, she has no business in Congress. She's seen as somebody who doesn't understand how the world works, and somebody who doesn't understand how businesses work, and someone who doesn't understand how to be a leader because she was a bartender. And sure, that's wrapped up in the fact that she's a young woman of color, but you cannot separate the fact that because she had a working class job, she is seen as unworthy of being a congresswoman, and unworthy as being seen as an expert or an authority on anything. And there was this really great tweet by journalist Dave Weigel, who basically said, look, one of the arguments that Fox News and so many sources make is that these jobs are easy jobs that anybody can do, so it's no wonder that they get low pay. And like they deserve it, and if they want to be better compensated, they can be better workers and get tips, or they can move on to better jobs. And Ocasio-Cortez kind of retweeted that and made the same point, saying that in a lot of ways, the hardest job she ever did was those service jobs. And she's including in that her work as a congresswoman and speaking in front of big audiences and doing all these sorts of things. So it got me thinking, and I tweeted about this as well, but it got me thinking about my positions in my career and all the jobs I've had. And I have to say that I fully agree. The reality is that, currently I'm an academic, I'm a postdoctoral fellow, but I've been an adjunct professor, I've been a graduate student, I've worked in white-collar jobs as a research assistant, but all of those things that require advanced educations and that compensate at least reasonably well were nowhere near as stressful or physically, and if I'm being honest, even mentally demanding as working at fast food restaurants like Tim Hortons and McDonald's. Those jobs were extremely stressful and physically and emotionally and mentally exhausting. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Those jobs are, there's a constant, uptime on those jobs. There's very little downtime. There's very little time to rest physically or mentally. Those jobs, especially when you work in the things like drive-through, all of your work is constantly being metricized. It's constantly being monitored. It's constantly being surveilled. You, in a sense, are being turned into a machine because all you are is a tool to through which the metrics of the business run. How many seconds does it take you to process an order? How many orders does your store process an hour? How many seconds does it take you to get from the drive-through speaker to the window and from the window out? And all of these various metrics matter much more than your humanity. And this is extremely stressful and grating because it takes into account none of the actual human realities at play. If the person at the mic takes too long, you get punished for that. If they come in and they order 7 McFlurries and there's only one McFlurry machine in your store, you physically cannot make an order fast enough to not get your boss mad at you because your times are bad. These are things, and that happens at Tim Hortons as well. If people want 5 toasted bagels in the drive-thru, you physically cannot do it fast enough to get the 30-second or 20-second or 40-second, I don't know what the metrics are today, window in play. These jobs were incredibly difficult. And from my perspective, again, being a highly trained academic, being somebody who's done mainstream media work, speaking in front of hundreds, if not thousands, and even tens of thousands of people, I would do the latter any day of the week than work at McDonald's or Tim Hortons, even if the pay was exactly the same. And I tell you, the more money I make, the less stressful and less difficult my work is. Other people have noted this. It's like I get paid more and my life is way easier. And it's easier because you are getting paid more. You're not worried about the stress of surviving. But it's just this idea that hard work equals good wages doesn't really apply. Some of the hardest working people in our society do it for minimum wage. And because they do it for minimum wage, they have to work multiple jobs because it's not enough to survive, especially if you can't get full-time hours at a single job. But even in some cases, people have a full-time minimum wage job and then a part-time minimum wage job on top of that. So ultimately then, all I'm trying to say is that from my personal experience, and I know others have said this to me, and maybe you guys will agree or disagree in the comments, I have never had such a difficult time as being a minimum wage fast food worker. And again, this doesn't even add the fact that so many waiters and waitresses and bartenders have, which is that in addition to the dirty physical, work, stressful work, they're dependent on tips of their patrons. They're dependent on the reality that because their minimum wages are low, the only way they can get a decent living is by taking abuse and taking dismissal from customers. And of course, not all customers are bad, but whether the customer is nice or not, you have to treat them with the respect that they may not give you because your livelihood depends on it. And a lot of folks have noted that this is a very gender dynamic because a lot of those tip jobs affect women. And so we have cases where women have to take a lot of, mistreatment from predominantly male customers, and it creates this really icky dynamic that no one likes, but the economics of the system are based on it. So whether you work at a minimum wage job that's tipped or not tipped, you're really in this situation where your work is extremely difficult, and it's extremely challenging, and it's extremely exhausting, and yet people see it as quote-unquote unskilled labor, deserving of, poverty, deserving of insecurity. And I think we really need to start challenging this notion. These sorts of jobs are essential jobs, and these sorts of jobs are challenging jobs. And these sorts of jobs require a level of multitasking that is in and of itself a very important and difficult skill. It's a skill I don't have. I was awful when I worked at McDonald's, and I was awful when I worked at Tim Hortons because I didn't have that level of ability to multitask in a way that so many of the people at those workplaces either had innately or were able to learn through months and years of experience. All workers deserve dignity. All workers deserve a living wage. All workers deserve job security and benefits in the workplace. Every single person deserves that. But we also have to stand up for the fact that if we really believe that hard work should equal good compensation, then the people who are doing minimum wage work right now, they deserve higher wages than many of us that are making good money as white-collar professionals.